ABSA says this is not unexpected because the PMI has tended to be volatile this year. And while local inflation and interest rates have come down, demand remains unpredictable. However, ABSA says while the index is disappointing, it's nothing to worry about.
I don't think that we should be looking at this latest print as an indication, I think, of a sudden renewed bout of weakness in activity in the sector, because we do know that when we look at the performance of the sector from one month to the next, volatility is not unusual. I think the key thing for us is that when we look at the performance of the PMI over the last few months in aggregate, in particular, if you look at the second half of the year, there's a very clear break, I think, from what we saw in the first half of the year. And I think what we're seeing more broadly in the results of the second half of the year is that this is a sector that's relatively stronger. Production levels do seem to be firm. And I think this is actually what we're likely to see in the third quarter GDP numbers that are going to come out tomorrow. Demand conditions are also relatively stronger relative to the first half of the year. So yes, a little bit of a disappointing blip in November, but I don't think that it's something that should worry us too much about the future of the sector going forward.
ABSA says these results reflect the challenges facing South Africa's manufacturing sector as volatile demand and cost pressures weigh on activity. It adds that while global demand offers some support, a weaker rand and domestic uncertainties continue to pose risks.
Cost of doing business is much lower right now, given that we don't have load shedding, or it's been suspended for quite some time. So I think that's really helping to give us these low PPI numbers that we've seen. We did see a little bit of an increase in the latest PMI data in terms of that cost index slightly. I think it's possible that some of it just reflects a little bit of the weakening of the rand that we've seen, particularly over the last few weeks. But I don't think that this is a signal that we should be expecting a particularly huge surge in PPI inflation going forward. I think the key thing is that when we look at the big cost drivers that many firms have faced over the last couple of years, those pressures, I think most of those pressures are certainly still quite muted right now. And we are still seeing not just producer inflation, but even consumer inflation into next year remaining relatively modest, which I think is also quite critical, of course, in terms of how the South African Reserve Bank will be thinking about interest rates going into next year.
Meanwhile, new sales orders and business activity index fell below the 50 index points mark in November. ABSA says despite some windfalls for the local consumer, some respondents said that domestic demand was still under pressure. But the good news is that the improved global demand was sustained in November, with export sales better than in October. Nothando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.